4-6, solving equations with fractions. Don't let that sound scary. It's not at all. In fact, solving equations with fractions is the same as solving other equations, with one exception. And we're actually going to wait for a moment and come back to that exception. So let's first talk about what makes it the same. If we had a plus 3 equals 4, you would know what a is. But the way we would solve it, remember, is using inverse operation, both sides of your equation. So our a has a plus 3. To invert that, we would do minus 3. And we would do that on both sides of our equation to find out that a equals 1. Now, if these were fractions, we would do them the same way. Meaning if I had a plus a half, and it equals 3 1/4, then I would subtract a half. I would invert the plus half by doing its opposite. And you know how to add and subtract fractions. So of course on this side we have just a, and then on this side we would actually need to get common denominators. So this would have to be 2/4. That would be equivalent. A fourth could stay the same. Now I can't take 1 minus 2, so I need to borrow. This becomes a 2. And 1/4, do you remember our secret little trick? 4 plus 1 is 5. That's our new numerator. So 5 minus 2 is 3. 2 3/4. Now, I said there was an exception. The exception is we don't divide fractions. So if we have an equation that's being multiplied, our inverse normally would be divide. But instead, since we don't divide fractions, we would multiply by the reciprocal instead. So let's look at that. If we had 3/4 and we were dividing by, or let's say that it's 3/4 times b equals 1/2. These are being multiplied, so normally the inverse would be to divide. But since we don't divide, what we will do instead is we will multiply by the reciprocal. And I hope you remember that means that you're going to flip it. So 3/4 would flip to 4/3. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal to figure out what b is. Now, as I showed you earlier in a lesson, sometimes visually people like to look at things a certain way. Most people like to look at multiplication of fractions horizontally. So I'm going to write it to the side horizontally. 1/2 times 4/3. See any canceling that we can do? Good. We are going to cancel our 2 and 4. We can divide by 2. So this would be 1. This would be 2. So now, when we solve this, we multiply 1 times 2. So that's going to be 2. Put my answer down here. And 1 times 3. So that's going to be 3. So our solution is that b is equivalent to 2/3. Now, if we had mixed numbers, remember that the first thing we would need to do is change them into improper fractions. So let's look at one like that. Let's make this 3/4 over here. Let's make it 1 3/4. So, whoops, come over here. 1 3/4. So what is 1 3/4? 1 3/4 is equivalent to, do you remember how to make it an improper fraction? Denominator times whole number plus the numerator. So 4 times 1, 4, plus 3. So it's equivalent to 7/4. But now remember, we're not going to divide by 7/4. Instead, we're going to want to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal will be when we flip that. So we're going to multiply by 4/7. And we can probably do some canceling here. Again, most people like to see it horizontally, so I'm going to write it that way. 1/2 times 4/7. And I think that you can see that we can cancel. So we're going to cancel by dividing by 2. We get 1 and 2. Nothing left to cancel. So our answer is 2/7. 2 times 1, 1 times 7, 2/7. All right, now one more thing to look at here. Two-step equations. It's been a while since we've done this. This was chapter 2 that we learned how to do a two-step equation. The trick here is to remember that we do the order of operations backwards when we're undoing. So we're going to undo any addition or subtraction first, and then we're going to undo any multiplication or division. So once again, I think we need to look at an example. So let's say that we had 1/3 times h plus 1 1/2 equals 4 1/8. All right. So the first thing we want to do is undo any addition or subtraction. Our addition is to add 1 1/2. So to undo it, we would subtract 1 1/2. Okay. Let me draw my long line here. 1 1/2. What am I going to need to do first here? Are you thinking? That's right, I need a common denominator. So what is 1/2 as eighths? It'd be 4/8. Good. What do I need to do now? I'm going to need to borrow because I can't take 1 minus 4. So I'm going to need to borrow and rename. Remember my shortcut? 8 plus 1 is 9. 9, now I'm ready to subtract. 9 minus 4 would be 5/8. And then our whole numbers, 3 minus 1 is 2. Good. Over here, on this side, I've gotten rid of my 1 1/2 by subtracting it. So I just have 1/3 times h. Now, I don't divide, because the opposite of multiply would be divide. With fractions, I multiply by, good, the reciprocal, which means I have to flip it. And times 3/1. Now remember, most people like to see it horizontally when we multiply. All we're going to have left here is h. So, what do we have to do when we multiply a mixed number? That's right, we need to make it improper. So 8 times 2, 16, plus 5 is 21. 21/8. Whoop. Times 3/1. Unfortunately, there isn't anything I can reduce here. You might notice that 3 and 21 have common factors, but they're not a denominator and a numerator, so I have to multiply them out. 3 times 21 would be 63. 8 times 1 is 8. Now we would need to rename. How many 8s are in 63? 7, with 7 left over. So my solution statement is that h equals 7 7/8. I hope this helps. Be sure and look at the slides again if you have any troubles or if you get stuck. And good luck. Happy practicing.